Hi everyone, welcome to the tutorial series about JDBC called as Simply JDBC. My name is Korde sir and I already have shared with you my email address as well as the contact number as part of my first presentation or an introductory presentation. So let's now get ahead with interaction with the database, and our focus now will be on the type 4 driver. Okay. So let's now try to see what are the different steps that are required as part of connecting to the database. So steps are, first step is you need to register the driver class. So whatever the driver class, that means you need to load the database driver. So because it's going to be a type 4 driver that you are going to do that, but here before we proceed and use it, so first step, and that is a mandatory step, is you need to register the driver class. The next point is about you need to create connection to the database. So once you are successfully connected to the database, then you actually can create your own SQL statement, and which goes in hand that you need to execute the query. So SQL statement is essentially a query, that is, we'll write an SQL and that particular query will be executed. So the bullet number 3 as well as the bullet number 4, they typically go hand in hand. So you first create a statement and then you execute it. Then once you execute the statement, typically you are going to get something called as results. So in the database terminology, that particular thing is called as result sets. So result sets is basically it's a query that you have performed. So of that, the data or the result will be given to you. So it is a set of records. So I could say it's a collection of record which is part of a particular table. So you are going to get the result set and you can navigate it through the result. So for example, you want to get the second row, third row like that, or second record, third record like that, and you can do that. So use result set, and then once you are done with all the job, then you can actually close the connection. So these are the essentially these are the 5 steps, or rather, though it is highlighted here as a 6th step, the creating SQL statement and executing, in a way it is like a one step. You are not going to do it like in a separate things as part of it has to be done in totality. So these are the different steps which are common for all the databases, irrespective of whether you are using MySQL or Oracle or whatever, and we will be using type 4 driver. So first step is register the driver. I am just reiterating this. So register the driver class, that is loading. This is called as loading the driver. Then you create a connection to the database. So you are going to create an object. So using that object, then further things will be done. And then you create SQL statement and then you execute those SQL those queries. Then whatever the results you are going to get, you need to iterate over that result. And then once you are done with all those on the jobs or processing of that result, you can close the connection to the database. So these are the steps that are required. Now let's proceed. Now let's try to understand little concepts about thin driver before we actually code it. So as we know, there are two things. One is something called as a driver manager. So the driver manager is, as I have told you, like we are going to use some connector. So this particular thing, which is called a java.sql.driver manager, essentially it's a class. It's a part of Java API component. So it's a class. What is it going to do? It's actually going to provide me a common access layer on top of different database drivers that I can use in application. That means I can just rely on java.sql.driver manager class, and I, as an application programmer, I don't have to worry whether I am talking to MySQL or whether I am talking to MS SQL server or I am talking to Oracle database. So it's actually going to provide a common access layer. That's why it is called as that's why it is basically highlighted as common access layer, and it sits on different database driver. Then before you actually use this particular thing, you require the driver to be registered, so that driver manager is aware of it. That means you cannot just simply say that I will use a driver to MySQL or I will use a driver to Oracle, but I have not registered it. So essentially, driver, before you use that, it has to be registered. So driver manager requires each driver whatever is required by the application, which must be registered before using it. So in a way, driver manager is aware of it, because as we see in the code, you will realize what I am trying to mention it here. Okay, so these are the two important things. Like driver manager is what basically is going to provide you the common access layer and independent of a particular database that you are trying to access. Now comes the important aspect is about the loading. So you need to load that. So you need to load the database driver using class loader, because there are two things. One is a driver manager class, which is going to provide you an interface or an API, something like a common access layer, and another thing is called as a actual driver. So you need to be loading that particular class for that particular driver. So the way in which it is shown here on the screen, you can see load the database driver using class loader. And the way in which it has to be done is, say for example I want to load Oracle driver, then I will be having a unique way to do that. So this is a class, so that's why it is called as class loader. So class dot for name, so this is the way it has to be done, class dot for name, and then give the complete path or the complete full name for that driver, that is oracle.jdbc.driver.oracle. Similarly for MySQL, the full name is com.mysql.jdbc.driver. If you make a mistake here, your loading of the driver will not go through, and you will have issues, or you will have, your program will not work. So this point is very important, that is class dot for name is a for name is a method that is provided as part of the class. So class dot for name, and then you will be passing, it is going to take the string argument, and the string argument is the complete name of the either Oracle driver or a MySQL driver. So this is very important, and we will see this in actual real usage as we proceed towards programming. So now let's go and understand how using a thin driver, that is type 4 driver. So as I have shown you, like when we were creating the table in my previous presentation, so how can we create a table? I have shown you as part of the MySQL workbench, it is part of MySQL. So using a tool like SQL workbench, you can create a table. So typically create table, when you do that, then a query will be generated in different tools. So automatically the query will be generated, and you can use it later, you can save it, and you can just do it. You need not do it manually every time. You can just run this query later as part of automation. So what will you do is that this is the way a query will be generated. Say for example I want to create a table employee. So I have created is using, say for example, using SQL workbench. Then this will be the query that will be generated. So it's a SQL query. So you can see this here, there is a create table, then the name of the table is employee, and the fields are, this is a primary key which is employee ID, then which is a auto increment, that means automatically it will increment, which is not going to be 0 or not null, rather not 0, it is not null. And then the name will be default, it will default name could be null. And here you can see the primary key is employee ID, and then here you can see all those other things which are related for the database, like InnoDB and all those stuff is part of this. So this is the generated query which is generated by a tool like SQL workbench. So in the next class, now we will go into more details about, now we know how to create a table, so we will now go into more details as part of how do we go about using type 4 driver. Thank you.